Hi, this is Everett, Everett's Watercolors. Welcome to my classroom. And today I'm broadcasting from Chesapeake, Virginia, as I do every Thursday at 2 o'clock. And I'm sending my message out to Facebook, YouTube, and LinkedIn. So welcome all aboard. I hope you're all watching, and I hope you enjoy the show. My wife, Gloria, is in the studio today.
Welcome.
She'll be monitoring the broadcast and checking out the chat room. Now, today I'm going to, before I start here, I'll remind you, if you're new, subscribe to my YouTube channel and give me some likes, and also sign up to my Facebook page if you're there. Just do a like, and I'll be able to broadcast for next week. You'll be able to get all my future correspondence. Now, what I want to do is I want to show you something here. I made a little transition. I made up a little chart here on the top left of my page here. Everett's Watercolors. My website is everettswatercolors.com. And my live classroom, you can see the broadcast after it's done. You can see a replay at everettswatercolors.com/classes.html. And also, I've invited people to do a paint along like today. So on my Fun with Watercolors page, which is listed here up here also, the link, it will have a drawing which I provided for the design drawing I used today. And then if you want to share your art, if you do something on my webpage or do something on my program, and you want to share it with someone, then you can go to my Everett's Watercolors art group, which I have the link here also showing. Now, these links will be in description below, but I wanted to show you what they look like and talk a little bit about them. But those are the ways you can contact me and also follow through on today's program and any other program that I have broadcasted before. So today I'm going to do a demonstration on rocks, and it's going to be a little different. I'm going to do some combinations. I'm going to go through some techniques, and then I'll show you some ways I do rocks, and then go right to an actual painting, and we'll get started. So let me go to my overhead camera. Go to my overhead camera and start you off with a program. Get you here. I'm going to turn the chat room on. Okay, the chat room's on. Turn on my light. And okay, this is the reference photograph I'm going to start out with. Now it's got a rocky. Okay, hi, Ira. Ira, it's good to see you. Thank you for showing up. This is reference number 1. Now this rock formation here has got a large mountain mass with some rocks here on the ground. And of course, there's a couple rocks on the mountains here in the background. And there's a little piece here that's got a little bit of rock. So this is going to be quite interesting how we paint this. But what I've done is also, this waterway here, I'm going to add another piece of land. So I've taken another reference photograph, which has some rocks, but this section down here, I'm going to add that to the photograph number 1. So this section here, I've added to this section down here. And I like the colors of these rocks here. So I'm going to use the colors, but I'm going to use this formation here to do the plot. Now, if you notice here on the type of rocks, there's a lot of shadow patterns in here. And these are very structural. You see it almost like blocks. They look like squares, rectangles. Over here, they're kind of irregular. And the rocks over here are irregular rocks. So there's going to be quite a variety of rocks today, along with the mountains. Okay, this is a diagram of my design. And I have this posted on my website, which I showed you at the link where you can download that and do a print out on a piece of watercolor paper, or sketch it out on a piece of print it off on a regular piece of paper, and then you can sketch it out or trace it out on a piece of watercolor paper. So that's my design plan of the two mountains I showed you. The mountain here, and I added this mass back here, and the mountains in the background. Okay, now here's my value study. So I've done the sketch here, and I've added in the darks and lights. Now this is probably going to be where the impact area is. The darkest darks and the lightest lights are going to be right in here. And there'll be some rocks coming down the hill, little rocks back here. And this second rock mass is here behind this one. And then there's the mountains way off in the background. A little bit of water and a little bit of sky. So that's really that's my design plan for today. Hi, Roy. Say hi to you. Nice seeing you. Today we're going to have a lot of fun. Now let's go over some of my colors here. I've done some water. I've done some mixtures also. Let's go over the colors I'm going to use today. I'm going to use one of my favorite colors, burnt sienna, royal blue, which is a very dark blue, alizarin crimson, which is a rich, very deep, rich red, yellow ochre. Now those right there is almost a primary, blue, red, and yellow. Then I'm going to use yellow orange for additional color. Now here's a new color, lavender. It's a very beautiful color. I'm going to use lavender in some of the rocks. Cobalt blue for the water and some of the rocks also. And then hooker's green, just a little touch of that, and Payne's gray to dull down some of the mixtures. Now all these colors are on Holbein Watercolors. And I'm using also Holbein brushes. And they're on my website, everettswatercolors.com. And also have that list of paints also on the description below in the video. Now some of the paintbrushes I'm going to use, I'll use the 3/4 inch flat from Holbein, the 1/2 inch flat from Holbein, number 16 round, which is nice. These are all synthetic. 16 round, number 6 round. And I'm going to have, this is the Silver Brush Quill, which is the number 10, which also I'm going to use. Okay, now some of the mixtures I've done here, just for mixing, the very popular one, I'm going to burnt sienna and mixed in with the dark blue, royal blue, comes into here. This will be giving a dark brown. Now, what I'm going to do though is I'm going to charge in different colors on top of that. What I mean by charging is I'm going to have the mixture, then I'm going to add some more colors inside of it. For example, ultramarine blue. This is Alizarin crimson, and even yellow ochre. So I'm going to be charging in different colors on top of this to give you a variety of colors. Now I'm also going to use the orange mixed in with a little bit of Payne's gray. It'll give me a mixture of, it'll give me a dull gray for some of the background mountains. And then I'm going to use this is the ultra. This is lavender. This is the lavender color mixed in with a little bit of Payne's gray. And then I'll be using cobalt blue, watered down for the water and also for the sky. Hooker's green, I'll mix in with a little bit of blue, give me a little bluish green. And then, of course, here's the orange again, along with yellow ochre, be used with different values, a little bit of water. Then if I add water to the Alizarin crimson, I can get a lighter red, and I can add in the orange to give me some. I may add in some quinacridone violet, or a little touch here and there. Okay, now down on the shadow patterns, you're going to see some of these structures of the rocks. The rocks almost look like bricks. And then the contrast of the light against dark will give you the shadow and the forward side of the rock. And then there's also rocks where there's a light side and a dark side. And then the grass is also just using the different brush strokes. I'll show you how to do that. Okay. Okay, now some of the techniques I'll be using here is that I'll be painting in the shadow patterns and then putting in the light side of the rock. So this is the shadow pattern and this is the light side. And then the rocks here, you can see here I can scratch it out. I've got an old credit card here that I can scratch out some of the color to give me a texture on that. So I'd rather demonstrate that on the painting. Here I'm just showing you some things that I've tried out here for demonstrations. And then the different brushwork here for the grass will be I'll be using the side of the brush. I'll be using the side of the brush here for brush strokes. I'll be using the quill for some of the brush work back there and so forth. So it gives you an idea of some of the techniques I'll be applying, but let's get back into the painting. So I've taken the diagram and I'm going to be following my value study. You can see here that I'm going to paint in the shadow pattern first, the darks. Putting the darks around here and some of the darks down here, even in the background. Put a little dark. So I'm going to start with the dark values first. And you'll notice from the photograph, there's a lot of darks in here, a lot of dark shadows and so forth. So I'm going to put the shadow pattern in first. And I'll be using my value study, which I've already mentioned. Okay. So the first thing I'm going to do is mix up some darks. Let me put these brushes aside here. I'm going to start out with the 1/2-inch flat brush from Holbein. And I'm going to start out with this royal blue. That's the darkest blue, darkest color of my palette, royal blue. And I'm going to mix a little bit of that with burnt sienna. Okay, then I'm going to take my smaller brush and I'm going to mix up a little bit of the alizarin crimson. A little bit of ultramarine blue. And then down here, a little bit of yellow ochre. All right, so I'm going to start out here. We're going to start, that's it. I'm putting in the shadow patterns first. So on this first big rock over here, I'm going to start out with the shadow pattern. We'll start up here. I'm going to follow my value plan. So this first rock formation here has a large shadow here on the side. And then I'm going to take a little bit of, let's say, take a little bit of alizarin crimson, and I'm going to go in there and just put that in on top. So I'm really putting some red over top of that color there, which gives an interesting color combinations. Then I'm going to take that same mixture, a little bit more burnt sienna with that royal blue, and I'm going to paint in the next shape. So I'm painting in the dark shadow patterns. And I'm also going to be connecting them, and I'll show you that here in a few minutes. But what I'm going to do is finish this off. And then down here, I'm going to pick up a little bit of yellow ochre and put that into this mix down here. So I'm adding another color. I'm charging another color on top of what I had. Now over here, there's a little cast shadow on this side. Now, as I paint around these, if I put the shadow patterns in, I'm leaving a white edge because that's the highlight on the rock. By painting around the edge, and that's where I connect the darks. I come down here and I run it on down, so I got these darks all connected here. Then I'm going to run this one up on this side and bring this shadow pattern down. So I continue on to build the shadows here around this particular formation. And then I'm going to break loose here and I'm going to show you a little bit more. Okay, then the shadows goes around this rock down here. And there's some other rocks down here that have shadow patterns to them. Okay, and the rocks down here on the kind of in the foreground here will have some dark areas. So I'm going to put the shadow pattern on these. Down here. Okay, now I'm going to leave that alone for right now. That just gives the idea that I'm putting in the shadow pattern. I'm putting in the shadow pattern I have here on the landscape, and I put it on the rocks. I put the dark side of the rocks right now, the shadow side. Now down here on this side, I'm going to use a little bit of let's see. Ah, I got some viewers from Brazil. Good to see you, South America. That's nice. Okay, I'm using a little bit of that lavender now. Mixing the lavender up, mix it in with a little bit of Payne's gray. And I'm going to put the shadow pattern down here on these other rocks down here. They're going to be a different color. So these rocks here that are behind this rock formation here is going to have another set of shadows. So I'm using a lighter shadow pattern, using a little bit of the lavender mixed in with a little bit of Payne's gray. And I'll darken it up slightly here, and there. So these rocks will have some shadow patterns here on the. It's kind of in the middle ground, but it's a little rock formation behind this other one. Now, the one behind that, this rock formation, I'm going to use a lot of lavender. And I'm going to mix a little bit of Payne's gray in with that. A little bit of Payne's gray. So again, I'm putting the shadow pattern here on these rocks. And you'll see what it looks like when I'm finished. I'm just going to put in some more of the textures here. So these rocks here are a little bit darker behind here. There'll be some shadow patterns over here on this side. Okay. So what I'm doing is I'm going further back in the landscape. We got darker shadows here in the foreground. Now as I go back, the shadows get a little bit lighter, but with a little more blue in the colors. So in the very far background, those low-lying, we'll use some cobalt blue, or that's going to use cobalt blue. Okay, use cobalt blue. Mix up a little bit of cobalt blue. I'm going to put in these low. Now these will be background mountains back here, and they're going to have a blue with maybe a touch of purple. Push them back in the background. They'll be blue, light blue. And this big one over here, I'm going to put that one in. A little bit of cobalt blue. A little bit more. A little bit of cobalt blue in this bigger mountain. This mountain's in front of the other one. So it'll be a little bit, just a little bit lighter in value. And then I'm going to charge a little bit of Hooker's green in there, just a little bit, just a little touch of Hooker's green. So add a little bit of green in with that blue to give it a little bit of different color than that other mountain. So that's the first layer. I'm going to put in the darker values on this mountain structure here, darker, a little bit lighter value here of darks, and even a lighter value here, and then a lighter value in the far background. All right, now I'm going to show you a sheet that I've already done. This is just to give you the idea of how I went from this. This is stage one, where I put the shadow patterns in first. Okay, after I finished in the shadows, I got all the shadows here in this large landmass here in the foreground, and the shadows on these small rocks. As I said before, the value gets a little bit lighter here as I go back behind this mountain or this rock mass here. These rocks are a little bit lighter, but they still have a darker value than the white. Then the next layer of rocks is a little bit lighter, and this is where I use the lavender, a little bit of Payne's gray in here to get a lighter blue or lighter blue tan, lighter blue brown gray color. It's a light bluish gray back here. And then the one in the background, this is the foreground, faraway mountains off in the background. Okay, so that's where it sets me up. Now, the next thing I'm going to do now is I'm going to put in the actual light colors on top of the shadows. And that's going to look something like this. I'm going to paint in a color over top of what I've done here. I put the shadows in first. Then I'm going to put in the light colors here. Then I'm going to put in a shadow. I'm going to put a light color on top of this rocks, and another light color here. And I'll probably leave the background alone the way it is. Just leave it light. So my next stage is now to put a light wash over top of the background shadows. So the first step I did was I put the shadow pattern in. Now I'm going to go ahead and put in the light colors. So I'm going to do away with my my darks here. Wipe up my palette. Now the mixtures I'm going to use now are going to be the lighter colors. So make sure my paintbrush is clean. It looks good. Okay. I'm going to mix a little bit of this yellow orange. I'm going to use a little bit of yellow orange. I'm going to put in a little bit of yellow lemon. Okay, so this is going to be my light colors. I'm going to go in here now and put in the lights. So right here, this is the highlights on these rocks. This is the sun shining in on top of these rocks. So I'm going to put this color in. And I'm going to pick up a little bit of other colors. I'm going to add a little bit of red here and there. So I'm not going to have one color. I'm going to mixing colors. So I'm charging in other colors in on top of this. That yellow orange here Then I can dab in a little bit of Alizarin crimson on top of that just to give a little change in color. But these will be the light colors of the rocks. This is the sunshine of the rocks. And as I go back, I'm going to add a little bit more of the yellow lemon to cool it down just a little bit. The warmer side is going to be here, but as I go back, I'm putting a little bit of yellow lemon now into the mix. Okay. And I can still put in a little bit of alizarin crimson, just to add a little touch of color in there. While that wash is still wet, it's perfectly fine to go in there and add another color on top. And that's the best time to do it, is when it's still wet. Now, I'm gonna pick a little bit of yellow ochre now. Yellow ochre is a little bit darker yellow. So I'm moving back over here to the right. So I'm going to get a little bit less intense, a little bit less intensity here. So I'm putting I'll put a darker yellow. In this case, it's yellow ochre. So as I move away from the impact area or the focal point here, the colors are getting a little cooler and a little bit not duller, but a little bit darker. Add a little bit of alizarin crimson in there on top of that mix. Okay. Now what I can do now is there's going to be some texture here on the ground, so I'm going to take a little bit of alizarin crimson now. Before I do that, no, I want to stay here in the foreground a little bit. Take a little bit of yellow ochre, and I'm going to put a little bit of texture here in the foreground. There's a little bit of some yellow bushes or yellow grass. So I'm using a little bit of dry stroke here with a little bit of yellow ochre on the brush. A little bit of yellow ochre, a little bit of brush stroke technique here, just to give it a rough. What I'll do is I think I'll take a little bit of that mixture here, wash out my brush here. Take a little bit of this yellow orange, a little bit of yellow. I'm going to put that on top of these other rocks. These foreground rocks here that are also hit by the sun. Okay. Okay. Now I'm gonna do some more. I'm gonna do some more dry brushing here. Also, dry brush. When I put the paint into the brush, put very little water in the brush. Very little water. In fact, what I can do is dab it off on a towel, a paper towel, to get most of. All I want really a dry brush is really just dry paint in the brush. And I'm going to take a little bit of that and go over again. Some of this get little brush strokes here. And I'm going to mix up a little bit of gray. It'll be burnt sienna, a little bit of ultramarine blue. It gives me a gray ultramarine blue and burnt sienna gives me that gray look. Then I'm going to use that. Take out the moisture. I'm going to use that across these other rocks. A dry brush stroke. Okay. That's enough of those rocks. Now let's go to the next section of rock. Go back to my 1/2 inch brush. And I'm going to mix up a little bit of Payne's gray. No, yeah, a little bit of Payne's gray mixed in with that orange. So I'm going to take that orange and that yellow lemon and make a light gray. It's going to have a light. It's going to have a yellow part. It's going to have a yellow color to it. And that's going to be the light area of these rocks up here in this section. Then I'm going to pick up a little bit of that lavender. A little bit of lavender mixed in with a little bit of Payne's gray. I'm going to go back in and darken up some of these little shadow areas, just a little bit, while it's still wet. Okay, I'm moving back into the landscape now. I'm going into that second layer, and I'm going to use that same little mixture there. I'm going to use a little bit of gray. Use a little more of lavender, a little more of Payne's gray. But then I'm going to add a touch of blue to that. Lavender's got some blue in it, but I'm going to put just a touch more. A little bit of cobalt. Lighten that down, add some more water to it. Now I'm going to take the excess water out of the brush by hitting the towel. I'm going to do a little bit of dry brush stroke here also, just real quick motion. Lay the brush flat to the surface of the paper. A real quick motion. Get a little dry brush technique. So this mixture here of light gray is really the front side of these rock faces. So this is going to be the light edges or the highlights for these particular rocks here. Now what I'm going to do though is I'm going to take a little bit of that blue. I'm going to make the tops of these a little bit darker. Because I want to separate the background from the middle ground here. This middle ground rock formation, I want to separate that, so I change the value. Now I'm going to take the side of the brush now and just scrape it down. Give me a rough edge. So I'm using this round brush, number 6 round brush. I'm just pulling that paint down. Gives me a textured look. Also feathering out that edge a little bit, just a little bit. And I think I'll take a little bit more here on this one. This rock face here has got some texture on it, so I'm going to pull that down. So I've got basically a dry brush, a round brush here. I'm using a dry brush stroke, which is very little water. and just using a scraping motion to bring it down. A quick stroke with very little water, very little paint in the brush. Just a moist mixture. Okay. All right, I think I'm ready to add some foliage now. Let's see. I'm gonna wipe up the palette a little bit here. Give myself a little room. Using a 1/2 inch brush, I'm gonna put a little bit of ultramarine blue and pick up a little bit of hooker's green. Little bit more blue. A little more blue. Okay. Before I go further though, let me get some more ground up here in the top. There's just a little bit. I'm going to use now number 16 round, load it up with paint, and take out the water. And I'm going to put just a little bit of there's a little bit of dirt, a little bit of sand showing up here on the top of this rock formation, just a little bit. Okay, put aside. Now I think what I'll do, I think I'll use the quill. Use the Silver Brush Quill brush. Mix it up with a little bit of ultramarine blue, a little bit of hooker's green. The same mixture I was doing before. Just add it in a little bit more. And what I want to do is take my this page, find it. Keep my test page here. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to use just little strokes here to show the foliage, show little bushes and little trees and so forth. That's basically it. And I also push the brush down into the mixture. Any soft brush or a large watercolor brush will do the same thing. So I'm going to go ahead and put in some little tree mass in here. These are bushes and tall. These are bushes that are up on top of this rock formation. So I'm just using a little dabbing, load the brush with that, push it down, get it spread out, then use a little dabbing motion. Now I'm going to go ahead and pick up some more of that Hooker's green now. I take a smaller brush, and I'm going to go in and put in some accents. Now accents can be dark or light, so I'm going to put in some darks here. Put some accents on these bushes, so to show some shadow patterns. Show a little bit more texture up here on these bushes. Low trees. This is some of the foliages up on top of this rock formation. Okay, now there's some of the same information, or some of the same this is low grass. I'm going to go ahead and put in a little bit of greenery in here. Hey, what I do is I push the brush down, spread it out, because that way I want it to I want to have an irregular edge. So a soft watercolor brush will do it. A natural hair brush will do it. A long-haired watercolor brush will do it. I put in some of the text. I'm putting in some of the greenery down here on the along the edge of the rocks here. This is a hill coming down into the near the water. Some of these small rocks are covered with grass, or intermingled with the grass. And I'll take that smaller brush now again with a little bit of darker mix, and I want to put in a little bit of accents, showing a little bit of shadows down here in this grass or weeds. So varying the contrast a little bit to give it a little bit more interest down here. So these are just wild. This is just wild grass down here growing on the rocks, this rocky cliff. I'm adding in some of the darker shadow patterns, a little darker shadow, a little bit of accents here. Also, I can darken up the bottom here on the corners and the bottom of a painting. Uh, Tone it down a little bit so your eyes don't go out of the painting too soon. And I can take this off here. Move this over a little bit. Okay. All right. Now the last thing I want to do is add in the water. So what I'm going to do here. Okay, cleaning the water is going to be pretty easy. Okay, I'm going to take let's clean out the palette again. Clean out the palette. Keep the palette clean so your paints don't get too mixed up. And what I'm going to do is going to mix up a little bit of cobalt blue. Make sure my brush is clean. Wash it out in the water, rinse bucket. Mix it off. Pick it off with paper tissue. Make sure it's clean. Get the water. Make sure your colors are clean. Clean out the palette. Make sure there's no extra color in there that you don't want. So I'm mixing up a little bit of blue. I'll do the water first. I think that's a more interesting one here. So I'll start with the water. So just a simple load the brush up and use a horizontal stroke here. Fill in the colors. paint around these rocks. Using a flat brush loaded with Cobalt Blue. I'll get a little bit darker as I go in toward the center here. A bit darker blue in here. A little bit darker next to the landmass as it comes forward. Smooth that out. Okay, that blue also will set off the combination here of the rocks. I'm going to take that Cobalt Blue now. I'm going to mix a little bit of Peacock Blue and a touch of Hooker's Green, just a touch. Make sure my brush is clean. When you mix another color, you got to be careful mixing it into the next mixture because it's in the brush. You got to make sure it's clean. So I'm going to start out here with the Cobalt Blue, just to get the color down. Then I'll pick up a little bit of this Peacock Blue. There's a little bit different bottom here near the rocks. A little more green. So I want to emphasize that a little bit. So put a little more color in the water to give it a little more interest. And up here, I'm going to leave a little bit of white next to the rocks so that it shows that there's a little bit of, maybe a little bit of action on the hitting the rocks here, a little bit of water. A little bit of water showing up here, some waves. I'll smooth it out. Okay. So it's a little more turquoise color here in the foreground because of the rocky bottom, and there's more algae and vegetation on the bottom of the waterway here coming in. So I put a little bit of greenery in there. And the last thing I want to do is add in the sky. What I'm going to do, how I'm going to do that is I'm going to use the big brush and the 1-inch and the 3/4-inch brushes. And let me make sure I get a nice clean palette. Make sure I have a nice clean brush. So I've been playing with other colors. Rinse it out. Blot it off. Okay, and the color I'm going to use is Cerelean Blue. I'm going to use a little bit of Cerelean Blue for the sky. and some yellow ochre, just a touch of yellow ochre, and that goes next to the landmass. We water down. So I got two colors for the sky. I got Cerelean Blue and a little bit of yellow ochre. Rinse out my brush again. Yeah, load the brush with Cerelean Blue. And before I paint the sky, I'm going to wet it. So take this 1-inch, the 1-inch Holbein synthetic brush, which is a nice large brush for covering large areas. So I'm going to use this to wet the sky. So I'm going to do this a little wet on wet technique. So I'm going to bring this in, wet the paper. Okay. I'll take that loaded brush with Cerelean Blue on it and come right across here. Put that wet on wet, makes it nice and easy to spread. Now I'm going to pick up a little bit of that yellow ochre, bring it right down next to the mountains. Take some yellow ochre. I'm going to take out some of these white areas up here in the top. Take that yellow ochre, and I'm going to go in and eliminate some of these whites down here in the foreground. So I'm reducing the extra white paper down here. So I'm going in here with some yellow ochre, just covering up the foreground. Get a little more warmth down here where the sun's coming through, hitting this rocky coast. Okay. Okay. I think I got the gist of it here. I think this makes this mountain mass or rock mass really show off here with that yellow orange color and the dark contrast of the shadow pattern. And then the rocks coming down the hill in the foreground, and I got the rocks behind that a little bit lighter, going back behind. And then even lighter yet is the second rock mass back here, a little bit of blue mixed in with that lavender, and maybe I also made a light gray out of lavender and a little bit of blue. And then the final far off mountains here in the background, a little bit of the furthest mountain's got a blue and it's got a little bit of green in it. And then top it off with the sky. So I'm going to put a mat around that. Bring it up in the center. Okay. All right. I think that turned out to be a nice painting. I really like the results of that. I may go back in after it dries and go in and touch up a little bit. This may have a little bit of darker values back in here to get a little more contrast between this section and this section. I think it's the only thing I need is to darken this up back in here. But other than that, I'm very pleased with the results. Okay, let me see. Maybe I got time. I can do that right now. Let me take a little bit of that lavender. A little bit of Payne's gray. A little more lavender. And let me test that out. Okay, I think that'll work. Okay, I'm gonna go back in here and put a little more contrast on this. So what I'm doing is by adding more contrast, adding more darks here or shadows, I'm breaking up these levels of the landscape. Now watercolor will dry a little bit lighter, so this looks dark. It looks a little bit dark now, but it'll dry much lighter. Let me put some over here, not as much, but I'll put a little hint over here of the same color. Yeah, the color will dry about 40% later, so I'm not, even though it looks a little bit there, I think that pushes that back even more, and that's what I wanted to have. And one thing I want to do though is put a little, let's see, I want to use a little, I'll use a little bit of Payne's gray with that lavender. I've used a little bit of lavender today, so now I turn it, what I'm going to do now is I'm going to put a little shadow, a little bit of shadow here next to the waterway here, just a little bit to break this, give me a little line. Take out some of that white paper. Okay. I can also add a little more contrast down here in some of these rocks. Just more highlights. That keeps a little highlights keep the eyes moving through the painting. Give you a little more to look at. Okay. I think that's better. I like that better. Okay. By adding a little more value back here in this area, it separated these two sections here, and it also separated from the background because these were too similar at first, and then these were very close. So just by putting a little dark value in there, and that could be a cast shadow from somewhere, from a cloud up in the sky or whatever, you make up your own story. Okay. All right, I'm gonna put the frame around that. Let's frame that one in. So as you do a painting, you're going to find, like it's here, every painting you do is going to be an adventure. It's going to be a journey, and you're going to learn a lot of things by trying different areas. This painting will be posted on Facebook and also a Facebook page. Holbein Watercolors, and also my website. So there's the finished painting. I like what it did. I like that I add a little. I think if you agree, how about give me a comment on it? I think see how you like it. It's I think that was a definite addition to the plan. Okay. So what I suggest you do, let me take you back to the main program here. Okay. All right. What you can do, what I recommend is you try painting that scene. You got the drawing downloaded, and there's the links up there, and I'll have them in the description below. But go to my Fun with Watercolors page, and you can download the diagram or the sketch if you need it. Also, you can look at the video here. You can see the actual reference photographs I used. And then go to the Everett Watercolors art group, and after you do your painting, post it on there. I would like to see what you do, and I'd like to get some comments. Also, comment about the painting today. I'd like to get some comments now that you've seen me paint it, the things you like and also you like to see in the future. So it'd be nice to have more people looking, so share it with your friends also. So I'll be back again next week on Thursday at 2 o'clock. Bye for now.